Welcome back to Ketamine Connections. It is still January, so I'm just going to go ahead and say Happy New Year. It is still the new year. It is still, honestly, here's the thing about New Year's vibes is that the new year actually starts like in traditions that are older than ours, in a lot of other traditions that are more in tune with nature than ours tends to be. New Year's is actually March. And what I mean by that is like, I don't care where you are in the country. If you're in a different part of the world, sure, call bullshit on what I'm about to say. But in the Northern Hemisphere, if you look out the window, like, what is alive right now? What is new right now? Like literally nothing. Things are dead. They've been dead for months and they're not going to start coming back to life until the spring, until early spring. So I'm just gonna maybe I'll just keep it going and say Happy New Year until we hit the spring equinox and just keep this party going. Welcome back to Ketamine Connections. Hi. My name is Anna Krishtal. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so glad you found us. This community is growing, and that brings my heart to life. For years, I've been working in the ketamine space, and there's so many players in the ketamine space, and there's little communication between all of us. And so, one of my intentions is to bring this conversation and connect, the practitioners to the facilitators to the clinics to the clients to the CAP practitioners to people like me who are integration coaches and things like that. And it's happening. This community is growing. And I'm so grateful you're here. Welcome back to the show. If you're new here, welcome to the show. There's so much goodness to be had. And there's more to come in this new year. One of the things that happened towards the end of last year, which was such a bummer and like really hurt me and my team, was that we were kicked off of Instagram. I don't know if you know this, there's a lot of censorship on social media. I think it's starting to be revealed a little bit with this like TikTok case in the whatever Supreme trials or whatever's going on. There's like more to be revealed, but there's so much censorship on these social media apps. And unfortunately, it's not a place to talk freely about psychedelic healing. It just sucks. And so we were kicked off of Instagram. Right now, we've decided as a team to focus more on YouTube because it seems to be more accessible there, but eventually we'll be coming back to Instagram. But all of that to say is that if you're interested in connecting, the best thing to do is to subscribe to the newsletter. Now, one thing I'll say about that, depending on when you're listening to this episode is going to air the week of January 20th. And right now in the month of January, everything on the back end of the website is being revamped. So my team is working really hard to switch us to a platform that's going to let us serve everyone coming in, like the community that's building more. Until that switch happens, we know there's dead links on the website. We know that there's things that aren't working. We're so sorry. Every week reaching out to people to kind of just like connect until the new website is up, until the new platform is working. And in the meantime, just subscribe to the newsletter so that when things are up and running, we have your email and we can connect in that way and just give you further information. And yeah, this episode, ketamine for anxiety, 3 tips for my anxious folks, is actually inspired by those of you that have been reaching out, which, by the way, if you go to the website, you go to the contact form and you just get my email. That goes directly to me. That doesn't go to my team. Nobody reads my email right now. So if you email, hypno at annakristal.com, that goes directly to me. You'll hear directly back from me. I know some people have been surprised of like, whoa, it's you answering the emails. Yep. We're a small team. We're growing, which is really exciting. And yet we are still very much a small team right now. So if you have any questions or if you ever want to say hi, like I would love to connect with you in an interactive way that is more interactive for me, I guess. Right now I'm just talking to you through this screen, and that's good and it's amazing and I'm so grateful, and I'm really excited in this new year to have more opportunities to connect with you guys in community. So a lot of you have been reaching out asking about ketamine for anxiety, and y'all are my people. I've been diagnosed with so many anxiety disorders over the years. My first diagnosis came, I think, at age 12 or 13, and have carried that one through, have carried others through. And the underlying theme of every diagnosis I've ever had is anxiety disorder. And I get it. I get anxiety, and I wanna say if you are struggling with anxiety, not only do I get you, but gosh, there's about 40 million people in the US that struggle with anxiety disorder every year. So 40 million people, and that's just the population that's, like, diagnosed, self-reporting, like, who knows where those numbers come from. I like to think of it as, like, if there's that many people, there's probably, like, 3 times as many people, and honestly, what I have noticed in my work professionally and also in my life personally is that since COVID, there's been an uptick in that. There's definitely a lot more of us that are walking through the world anxious. We were locked in our houses for however long, your city, your state had those mandates. And then all of a sudden things were lifted, but like not really. Like there was this whole like collective trauma that we underwent that we didn't deal with. We didn't talk about it as it was happening in the way that we were talking about it. Shit was hitting the fan and we needed to talk about like other things that had to do with it, but we didn't talk about how it had affected us as a collective on a personal level. So the uptick in anxiety just from like that experience alone has definitely come up. And what I'm seeing a lot more in my practice as well is a lot more people with social anxiety. So there's different flavors of anxiety. Like it's a spicy little diagnosis. It's a spicy little thing to have. Like I said, I've had it for most of my life. I've been diagnosed with it most of my life, and I've worked with people with different anxiety disorders for with ketamine specifically for the past 4 years and, in my hypnosis practice for the past 7 years. So that's really this all to say is that this episode is for you if you struggle with anxiety, and also I want you to know that I have a different take on anxiety than most people. A lot of people, a lot of professionals, and also people in your life might say something to you as like that you have issues, right? Some people are like, "Oh, you have issues. Why can't you just calm down? Oh, why can't you just, take it easy? Like, stop worrying so much. Like, why are you asking all these questions?" Like, if you hear any of that, first of all, like love and compassion for you receiving that message, love and compassion for the people sharing it with you that obviously don't understand you or anxiety or how anxiety works. So this episode is for just generally anyone that's struggling with anxiety or has struggled with anxiety. If you have someone in your life that struggles with anxiety, you might get some insight through this episode. But all of that is to say that as a hypnotherapist, I have a different take on anxiety than a lot of other people. And when you start getting into ketamine therapy, subconscious reprogramming, hypnosis, all the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, what you're going for is the root, right? Worry is the manifestation of something underneath, right? Asking a lot of questions, like being paralyzed by fear, all of that is like the result of what is underneath. If you think about it like a tree, you're talking about the branches, right? Sure. Cut off the worry, right? Cut off those branches, like cut off the asking questions, cut off the paralyzing fear, cut off all of these like extremities of anxiety. But until you get to the trunk, until you get to the root, the anxiety is still going to be there. And, if you've ever trimmed a tree in your backyard or seen one, the branches grow back in different ways. So when you start investigating anxiety from ketamine therapy, from subconscious rewiring, subconscious reprogramming, you're going in for the root. And so therefore the perspective that you're going to hear in this episode might be really different. And what I would love for you to do is just take off the hat of, I know what you're about to say. I know what this all means. Like, really, like, can you just clean the slate, erase the board, and listen to this from a fresh perspective? Because when you do, I guarantee there's going to be something in this episode that clicks and opens something up for you. Because when you start talking about getting to the root of anxiety, when you start talking about really getting underneath the earth and getting down into the nitty-gritty of anxiety, it's going to be different. And the other thing too is that I want you to be open to this information as much as possible. So, yeah, let's just like let's all together, right? Like I am wearing this hat. I don't have a hat near me. I'm wearing this hat of like, I know what you're about to say. I know how anxiety manifests. I know all these things. And just take that hat off, like hang it on a hook. You can pick it up later. I promise it'll still be there. And the other hat that I want you to take off is the hat of judgment for this information. Because when I started hearing, like my first hypnosis teacher that started talking about anxiety, the way that I am about to talk about anxiety, I was triggered as fuck. I was like, you can't, like, how dare you simplify anxiety in this way? How dare you minimize it? How dare you reduce it to like what I'm about to say? And then I took off that fuck you hat and I hung it on the hook and I hung out up the hat of I know what you're about to say. And I hung up all the hats and I just like came into it with a clear, open mind. And I started practicing the things that this person was saying. And guess what? It worked. It helped. Because the thing that I always like to say about anxiety is that anxiety feels like this big problem. And it is. I get it. It takes over. Gosh, I cannot stress enough like the physiological, mental, emotional, like physical, like, oh my God, the grasp that anxiety can have is so consuming. And when you have a big problem, our society has trained us to believe that you need a big solution. And that is actually not always true with anxiety. So if you're open and willing to hear a different perspective on anxiety from someone that has worked with anxiety for 7 years professionally, someone that is under control, unmedicated, by the way. There's another episode where I talk about my journey. I was medicated when I was younger, and I just got really brave and really arrogant to get off of the meds rather quickly. So I've been unmedicated for all the diagnoses that I've ever had. I'm not medicated for any of them right now, and my anxiety takes up so little of my life. It's still there because I like to think of it like my friend, it's like, oh, hey friend, like, come on in. We're gonna go to yoga together. We're gonna take this road trip together. We're gonna start this podcast together. Like, come on. But it's not the driving force. And even if it's not the driving force in your life, like I know that moment where like anxiety hooks you and then all of a sudden you're on anxiety's road trip instead of anxiety being on your road trip. So all is that to say, if you're still listening, if I have not like scared you off with this long intro, then you're open, you've taken those hats off, just like sit down, enjoy listening to a new perspective. Okay. Really quickly before I dive into the first tip, I want to just like bring something to light just because this is a podcast about ketamine and ketamine therapy. And I know that there's a lot of you that are listening to the podcast that are on this journey to understand like, is ketamine right for me? And maybe you're someone who is exploring that question and you have anxiety. You have anxiety disorder, diagnosed or undiagnosed, whatever it is, you resonate enough to like, still be listening to this episode. So here's the thing that I want to say is I find it really baffling. So if you look at the studies, like you look at the clinical studies about ketamine and what it's really, really effective for, and top of the list, you have depression, and then you have PTSD, and then you have anxiety. And with all of those, the numbers drop. But here's the thing about PTSD. PTSD is a form of anxiety. Okay. It's anxiety with a backstory, right? It's anxiety that like has a really traceable, obvious root, whereas other forms of anxiety still have that, by the way. It's just like less obvious. And so if you're on this journey, right, like maybe you have seen all the doctors, maybe you've tried so many medications that you've lost track. And all you want to do is find your authentic self because anxiety like takes you for this ride. You don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know how long you're going to be there. It's like literally a hijacking and you want to heal. You want to be happy. You want to get your life back. That is possible. And it's exponentially more possible when you work with someone who understands anxiety because there's so many people that come to ketamine and are like, I tried it, doesn't work. But if you don't have the right mentorship, if you don't have the right guidance, if you don't have someone who understands anxiety and is able to help you understand anxiety, help you understand it, then it's putting you at a disadvantage. And I want to say that because so many people coming to ketamine are coming to it as like kind of the end of the road, kind of a last hope, kind of a last ditch effort of like, I've tried all the things. Like I've tried so many medications. I've lost track at this point. It's been, 2 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it's been. Like people say I have issues and people say I need help and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to try ketamine, especially if that's you. I want you to, yeah, really like find someone who understands anxiety because when you have ketamine combined with someone who understands anxiety, you can like literally skyrocket out of your current situation. When you have someone that understands anxiety and you don't even add ketamine, that could still skyrocket you out of the situation that you're in. Because when you have someone that knows how anxiety works, that understands its underlying causes, understands how to get you there, understands you how to shine light on that. Once you shine light, right? It's like you have your dark closet, right? Like you have a closet in the attic that you haven't been to in 20 years. And someone's like, come on, let's go up there and let's light a flashlight or put on a light or whatever. And it's like once you see what's in there, you can't unsee it. And that is how subconscious work for anxiety. Okay. So that out of the way, I just want to like kind of call bullshit on the industry that's like, oh, ketamine for PTSD, great. Ketamine for anxiety, not so great. Someone please explain the difference to me because I don't hear it. PTSD is a form of anxiety. So the first thing, the first tip that this is the one that like, whoa, this is the one that like got me. When my hypnosis teacher all those years ago said this, and I was just like, I'ma get you. Um, Anxiety is a learned pattern. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want you to understand is that anxiety is something that you picked up as a coping mechanism that you then began to practice, right? And actually, Dr. Gabor Mate, if you haven't listened to his work, he talks about this a lot. His book, The Myth of Normal, is incredible. I mean, just that title, right? The Myth of Normal, right? Like anxiety is not normal. Well, then what's normal, right? Normal is such a freaking myth. It's such a BS. And honestly, maybe it's because of like my line of work, my past history, whatever it is. Like, where are my neurotypicals at? I like don't know if I know any. Truly, maybe one, maybe. So, anyways, at one point, something happened and some form of anxiety was your coping mechanism, right? Like, okay, this thing happened and I'm going to make sure that it never happens again. Great. Now you are hypervigilant and that is a form of anxiety. Or something happened, you're like, I am going to understand everything always. Great. Now, like asking a lot of questions is a great coping mechanism to try to get to the root of that. So, or try to prevent that. So, it is a pattern, right? And here's the thing. I want you to imagine if you know how to drive a car, because like I used to live in New York City and like not everyone there knows how to drive a car. And truly I was miserable at it for a long time. If you know how to drive a car, if you don't, maybe like ride a bike. And if you don't know that, like imagine when you started walking, the learning process, right? It's like when you first start learning to do anything, you stumble, you fall. Like there is this learning curve on learning anything. And so anxiety is something that you learned how to do and you're quite good at it, right? It like is something that you have practiced over time. And so when you think of it that way, when you think about anxiety as a pattern and it's a pattern that repeats. But the hope in that is that if it is a pattern, it means it's predictable. And that's why I love hypnosis because hypnosis is all about predicting. What is it like getting to know, predicting, and breaking patterns. And that's essentially the outline of this episode. Spoiler alert there. But if you are, yeah, it's like understanding, like the first step is like, oh shit, like anxiety is a pattern and it loops. And once you understand that, then that's when you have, because then that's when you can start observing the pattern. Like if you've tried all the things and it feels like nothing works, it's probably because no one has actually guided you to understand what's happening underneath. And what's happening underneath is there's a pattern looping. And the good news about that, and that is tip number 2, is that once you understand that it is a pattern, right? Like I want you to, yeah, how can I explain this? Like if you're not driving while you're listening to this, just close your eyes for a moment and imagine any time that you've been anxious and imagine the time before that when you were anxious. And notice how, even if you're not familiar with the onset of that anxiety, notice how there's patterns there for you to observe. Okay. participated in that. And here's the thing, once you understand that it is a loop, like it is a self-reinforcing loop, and understand that it's serving a purpose, right? It's not out to get you. It is serving some really good purpose that is just like not been updated to say like, actually, it's not helpful. The next step, the next tip is to start interrupting that loop, right? And I don't care what that looks like, okay? Because it can look like, as you close your eyes and you just imagine two times that you like had an anxiety episode, right? Varying degrees of intensity. Once you start understanding that there's a pattern there, like you can literally like, gosh, I'm known to do this. I just like will put on a song and start dancing. I'm just like, nope, not going down that train. I'm going to go down this train. I'm going to get off that train and I'm going to like stand at the stop. I'm going to wait for the next train, which by the way, is an episode. Oh, no, it's not an episode. Sorry. It's a hypnosis recording. If you're not signed up to the hypnosis library, that link is in the show notes. Hypnosis is an amazing tool to interrupt anxiety, get to know it, befriend it, and get control over it. So interrupting, however you can interrupt the anxiety, whether it's like literally putting on music, walking outside, stomping your feet, anything that interrupts anxiety, interrupts that loop is going to start creating a mismatch, right? Your body is used to a certain cadence. It's like first this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, right? First, I feel some subconscious fear about something, then I get freaked out, then I start asking a lot of questions, then I'm spiraling into anxiety, and then I need to take a nap, however your version of that looks, right? When you start recognizing that this is a pattern, you start interrupting that pattern, then you start becoming unpredictable. And that's where that's like, honestly, that's where ketamine can come in, because ketamine interrupts that pattern for you. But if you have the ability, if you have the strength to go at it on your own, with ketamine, it's going to move a lot faster. Without ketamine, it's still possible to start interrupting those patterns. And if you are someone who is anxious, who's considering starting ketamine therapy, I highly recommend starting with that now, so that by the time the ketamine is in your life and you have like that extra resource, you're already practicing these tools. And that's what I want you to know, right? Is like once you start interrupting the pattern, that's when you're essentially upgrading your software. Okay. Your iOS in your brain is used to like A, B, C, X, Y, Z. This is how life works. And if you really do some introspective work to look back at your pattern of anxiety, I bet you will see those patterns. And if it doesn't feel safe to go there on your own, please, get in touch with someone that can guide you there, whether it's me or someone else. Like really get someone who understands anxiety. And so what happens then is once you are interrupting the anxiety, you're already essentially upgrading your iOS. You're already essentially upticking your subconscious mind, and you're creating an access point for change to happen, because all of a sudden your subconscious mind going, but she always responds like this in the situation, and now she's like dancing to a song, or like she's always like, it is like, it's PM and it's time for her to freak out, and instead of freaking out, she's sitting down and meditating or listening to one of those hypnosis recordings. That's already creating access for an upgrade. So that takes me to tip number 3, and that is to start imagining your life without anxiety. And this is a tough one. Here's what I mean by that. I've been working with anxious people for, like I said, 7 years, and everyone who comes to me, okay, 99% of people, there's that 1%, don't at me. But 99% of people that come to me and I'm like, hey, okay, cool. Like, here's what's happening. How would you like to feel? And the number one thing that I get is like, well, I don't want to be anxious anymore. Well, I don't want my life robbed by anxiety. And I don't want like to have these issues anymore. And I don't want to be like blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, great. So happy that you're so clear on what you don't want, but that's not what I asked. I asked what you do want. And I want to like pause for a minute and like let that sink in, right? If you don't want to be anxious, what do you want? Do you want peace? Do you want relaxation? Do you want like feeling like you actually have control over your mental state? What do you want? Okay. And I know that's really triggering. Trust me, I could do a whole episode on how triggering that question is of what do you want. But what I would recommend is to start imagining your life without it. Because what happens is you recognize that there's a pattern, you start interrupting the pattern, and now you have an access point for change to come in. However, if you're not bringing the change in with imagination, with guidance, with mentorship, things like that, then you're just going to slip back into the old. You create a really powerful access for change when that pattern is interrupted. And so, what would it be like to not have old patterns, right? Like, what would those new patterns look like? I can't even tell you how many people I have seen go from like, I can't even imagine my life without this, to like, oh, now I'm actually living a life without this. Because once you start working on this, it really can move a lot faster than you think. Especially like I said, with the right guidance, with the right mentorship, with the right people who understand what you're going through. And one of the things that I personally love including when you are um interrupting those patterns, right? When you're like interrupting patterns and bringing in new patterns, what I really recommend is different tools that get into the subconscious mind. And one of those is subliminal recordings. Okay. So, what subliminal recordings are is that you just listen to the music, right? So, it's great for like meditation, it's great for waking up to in the morning, it's great for like putting on while you're cooking, working, whatever. It's like that focus music that can really soothe an anxious mind. But here's the thing, your conscious mind operates at a different speed that your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is like light years. Your subconscious mind is like a supercomputer, and your conscious mind is like an analog flip phone, right? Where you got to like T9. If you know, you know. If you don't know, it's fine. But what's happening in a subliminal recording is that underneath the music, there are affirmations that your subconscious mind can hear that your conscious mind cannot. And so it's one of the best ways to embed new beliefs, new systems, new everything to begin to rewire the subconscious mind. It's also really good if you have an anxious mind. It's also really good to know how the subconscious mind works. Like I said, when I was still in my throes of like really extreme anxiety. I was in a hypnosis training. Long story how I got there. That's like a whole nother story for a whole nother day. And all of a sudden I'm learning about anxiety and I'm like, oh shit, this shit makes sense. Like before that, anxiety didn't under it makes anxiety did not make sense. So understanding how anxiety works, interrupting it and then embedding new things, whether it's with hypnosis, meditation, or subliminals. The reason I love subliminals is because you don't have to do the work, right? When you sit down to meditate, like, God bless, like, sitting down to meditate with an anxious brain, I get it, I've been there. Hypnosis is better. Like I said, if you haven't listened to my hypnosis library, I hear, like, literally at least once a week, I hear that it really helps people, especially people suffering with anxiety, because you don't have to do anything other than follow the sound of my voice and let it guide you to a state of calm, peace, and relaxation. And then also subliminal recordings. So, what can I tell you other than, if you've been living with anxiety for a little or a long time, like, I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorders I had those diagnoses for like over 20 years before I started learning this stuff. And then that's really when things like really changed. And now, like I said, like, yes, anxiety is present in my life, but it's like so freaking tiny, right? It's like a little ant compared to previously where it was like a freaking dinosaur that would like pick me up and it's like, oh, did you think you were going to the grocery store? Not today. Like now you're gonna go sit in the corner and like think about everything, every decision you've ever made, everything you've ever told anyone, and like good luck getting out of the house today. You're going to go like over there, right? It was just like, what? No, I want to go do something with my friends. It's like, no, anxiety says you cannot today. And now it's like, anxiety's like, excuse me, don't you want to like rethink your life? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. In fact, I'm going to go do that right after this recording this episode. So anxiety doesn't have to run your life. When you understand the subconscious mind, when you understand how to like spot those patterns, spot the loops, interrupt the loops, and then replace them with the things that you actually want, whether you're replacing them with hypnosis recordings or meditation or subliminal recordings, like literally it's possible. It moves faster than you think, and it's really freaking cool. So, yeah, and if all of that sounds good to you today, when no, this episode is airing the week before. Okay, so next week on Wednesday, January 29th, I'm leading a workshop that's literally going to go into more in depth on all of this. So I'm going to be leading a workshop on January 29th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And what we're going to do a crash course on what the subconscious mind is, because I don't care if you have anxiety or not. I want everyone to know this. I want you to know what the subconscious mind is. I want you to like, right? It's such a big part of your brain, by the way. It's 95% of your brain. And at the same time, like you're like, but what is it? Is it even real? That's one of the top episodes of the podcast is the first episode of Is the Subconscious Mind Even Real? Which just shows that like we need this information out there. So whatchamacallit? Yeah. So I want you to be able to, by the end of this workshop, be able to like point to your subconscious mind the way you can point to your nose, the way that you can point to like your elbow. And people are like, what's the subconscious mind? You're like, I know where it is. I know what it does. I know I got it, you know? So we're going to go through like a crash course in what the subconscious mind is. We're going to go into a crash course of how to use subliminals. And we're going to go into a crash course on how to actually speak to your subconscious mind. Okay. Because it's not what you think. Your subconscious mind speaks a different language than your conscious mind. And once you start talking to your conscious or subconscious mind, that's when it like minimizes that anxiety. That's when anxiety goes from like a level 10 to a level 2. Because like I started this episode with, right? Like your friends, your dear family, all these people that have the best intentions for you, they're like, just calm down. Is that helping? No. Right? The people that are just like, just get over it. Is that helping? No. But once you start knowing the language of the subconscious mind, then you can actually do the thing that helps, the thing that works. So that's my hope for this, what is it called, workshop. And then the cool thing about it too is that included in the price of the workshop is a subliminal recording that is personalized to you. There are subliminal recordings that you can access like all over the internet personally, because I can't hear what's like, hi, I'm me. And you mean to tell me that underneath this recording, it says all of this good stuff, but I can't hear it? Like, and there's been subliminal recordings that have been exposed as being shady and just like not great. And you want me to trust that they're saying the things that I need to hear? Like, I rather make my own. So you'll get your own that's personalized to you. And if you are curious, like go read some of the testimonials on the page. All of that is linked in the show notes and get to know, yeah, like what's possible here, because those testimonials are pretty freaking cool and you can literally transform your life in just a couple of months, like even less, with understanding anxiety, understanding the language of the subconscious mind, and working with your own personalized recording, subliminal recording. Great. That is all that I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you are enjoying the podcast, like reach out, get on the newsletter so that you're informed. And also, yeah, it really helps if you guys review. And it doesn't help just like the algorithm, like that's all good and great. Like honestly, this podcast is growing so fast because it's reaching the right people, because the right information is finally getting out to the public. But it helps me, it just helps me like be interactive with you guys. There's like, so many of you. This podcast is growing so fast. There's so many of you, and you're just like numbers in an app somewhere that like tells me how the podcast is doing. Once I have names, once I like have a conversation with you, it's just like it helps. It just makes me feel like it makes me feel like you're real, much like I'm sure like you seeing me makes this feel like I'm more real. So the other thing with that is that we're now on YouTube. And as we get into deeper into 2025, this episode I recorded on video. So this video is going to go out. Some of the earlier episodes are not on video, so they're not going to go out. But yeah, go like find us on YouTube as well. If you want to see my face, here it is. It's all over YouTube now. Definitely not on the gram, because as I said, we got booted off the gram. So if you want to connect with us, make sure that you connect with us through email, because then we can always get in touch regardless of what censorship is doing out in the world. That is all I have for you today. Thank you all for being here. I so appreciate you. You know, share it with a friend. I hope you got something from the episode. If you did, also like, oh my gosh, please leave a comment and let me know what resonated with you so that I can also like bring more of that in, right? Like I'm just here to serve and help, and I know you have questions, so the more you reach out with your questions or drop comments, the more I can speak to that in future episodes. All right, I'm going to drop off now. Have an amazing Wednesday. Thank you for being here. Please stay curious, and that's it for Ketamine Connections today. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Ketamine Connections. I hope you found our discussion insightful and empowering, Remember that understanding the subconscious mind and how to make the most of ketamine therapy can truly transform someone's healing journey. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with your friends and family and anyone who might benefit from this information. So few people considering ketamine therapy are fully educated about its potential and the impact that it has on the subconscious mind. Your share could be the key element to their transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to Ketamine Connection so that you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I absolutely adore reading your reviews. So your feedback really helps me feel like this is an engaging exercise. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking into empty internet space. So your review really helps light me up and also helps me reach more audience. So I would appreciate one if you're willing. And please use the link below to submit any questions or topics that you would like covered. I cannot wait to hear from you and to co-create this journey together. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the possibilities that are available in this moment right here, right now. Thanks so much. See you next time on Ketamine Connections.